For centuries, Jews have been persecuted and mistreated. They have been driven away from many countries, especially in Europe during the Middle Ages. The conflict between Palestine and Israel is a long-standing and deeply complex issue rooted in historical, religious, and political disputes. Emerging in the early 20th century with the decline of the Ottoman Empire and the rise of nationalist movements and Zionist movement in 1891. The conflict has revolved around territorial claims. The establishment of the State of Israel in 1948 and subsequent wars and uprisings, such as the Six-Day War and the Intifadas. Key issues include the status of Jerusalem, the borders of Israel. What is actual reason behind this massive and aggressive war over children, women, and old people? Today, I will reveal truth. Before starting video, subscribe my channel. Jews have been driven away from many countries, especially in Europe during the Middle Ages. Even in Arab countries, but why? Here is most important question. Jews have been declined throughout era from Europe and Middle Ages. They call themselves supreme nation on earth. Jews wanted to rule on the world, and still they have this belief. That is why Jews were not treated fairly and were forced to leave. This has been happening for over just a century ago. Jews felt strongly that they needed their own country where they could be safe and free. They had been wandering as nomads for too long, and they wanted a place to call home. In the same time, a movement called Zionism was started that wanted to create a country for Jewish people. It was founded in 1897 by Theodor Herzl, a Jewish journalist who was concerned about the growing anti-Semitism in Europe. Herzl believed that the only way to protect Jews from persecution was to give them their own country. He argued that Palestine was the ideal location for this homeland, as it had been the historical homeland of the Jewish people for centuries. Herzl's ideas were met with mixed reactions. Some Jews supported his vision, while others believed that it was unrealistic and dangerous. However, Zionism gained popularity in the early 20th century as more and more Jews began to suffer from persecution and discrimination. In 1917, the British government issued the Balfour Declaration, which expressed support for the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. This declaration was a major victory for the Zionist movement, and it paved the way for the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. In 1914, World War I began. At the time, the Jewish population of Palestine was around 85,000, or about 11% of the total population. The war was fought between two major alliances, the Central Powers, Germany, Austria-Hungary, the Ottoman Empire, and Bulgaria, and the Allied powers, Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Canada, Japan, and others. The war dragged on for years, draining the resources of all involved countries and creating pressure to end it. Great Britain saw the Ottoman Empire as a weak point in the Central Powers and sought to capture it and defeat its allies. The Arab people in the Ottoman Empire were restless under Turkish rule. They felt that their culture and traditions were being suppressed, and they resented the Turkish government's heavy-handed policies. Great Britain saw the Arab discontent as an opportunity to weaken the Ottoman Empire, which was a key ally of Germany in World War I. The British government made secret deals with Arab leaders, promising to support them in their fight for independence if they would help the British defeat the Turks. At the same time, the British government was also seeking ways to bring the United States into World War I. The British knew that the U.S. was reluctant to get involved in a European conflict, but they hoped that the U.S. would be more willing to fight if it meant supporting a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The Arab leaders who had made deals with the British were furious when they learned of the Balfour Declaration. They felt that the British had betrayed them by promising the same land to both the Arabs and the Jews. Great Britain also signed a secret agreement with France, called the Sykes-Picot Agreement, to divide the Ottoman Empire's Arab territories between them after the war. This agreement was made without the knowledge or consent of the Arabs, and it was essentially a double-dealing move by the British. Great Britain was making unrealistic promises to all sides in order to win their support in World War I. The British did not have the resources to fulfill all of their promises, and they were not really interested in giving the Arabs or the Jews their freedom. After the war, Great Britain and France divided the Middle East into zones of influence. Great Britain took control of Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan, while France took control of Syria and Lebanon. Britain already controlled Egypt, so they now had control of the entire Suez Canal zone. In November 1918, World War I ended. After the war, Great Britain, which had control of Palestine, allowed a large number of Jews to immigrate to the region. This influx of Jewish immigrants alarmed the Palestinian Arabs, who feared that they would be outnumbered and displaced. The Jewish population of Palestine grew from 7% in 1918 to 1%, to 33% by 1930. At the same time, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany and began persecuting the Jewish people. Many Jews fled Germany and other European countries, and many of them immigrated to Palestine. Imagine a country where 93% of the population is one group, the Palestinians, and 7% of the population is another group, the Jews. Now, imagine that a foreign power, Great Britain, allows a large number of people from the second group, the Jews, to immigrate to the country. This would cause alarm and concern among the first group, the Palestinians, who would fear that they were being outnumbered and displaced. After World War I, the United Nations was tasked with creating a new world order that would prevent future conflicts. One of the challenges facing the UN was the question of what to do with Palestine. The British had controlled Palestine under a League of Nations mandate since the end of World War I, but they were now withdrawing from the region. The UN proposed a plan to divide Palestine into two states, one for the Jews and one for the Arabs. The plan was based on the idea that both Jews and Arabs had a right to a homeland in Palestine. However, in 1948, the Jews declared independence and established the State of Israel. This led to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, which resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians. The war also led to the creation of a Palestinian refugee crisis, which continues to this day. After the Jews established the State of Israel in 1948, they began to increase their population in Palestine. This led to the expansion of Israeli territory and the shrinking of Palestinian territory. The Jewish population of Palestine increased significantly after the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. This was due to a number of factors, including immigration from Europe and North America and high birth rates. The expansion of Israeli territory occurred through a number of means, including land confiscation, settlement building, and military conquest. The shrinking of Palestinian territory occurred through a number of means, including displacement, land confiscation, and settlement building. The West Bank and the Gaza Strip remained under Palestinian control after the British left Palestine in 1948. The rest of Palestine came under Israeli control. The Palestinians have been fighting for their own independent state since 1948. In 1967, they joined forces with other Arab countries in a war against Israel, known as the Six-Day War. Israel won the war and captured the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights from Jordan, Egypt, and Syria, respectively. The British mandate for Palestine ended in 1948, and the State of Israel was declared on May 14, 1948. The 1948 Arab-Israeli War resulted in the displacement of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians and the establishment of the Palestinian refugee crisis. The Six-Day War took place in June 1967, and Israel defeated the Arab countries in 6 days. Israel captured the West Bank, the Gaza Strip. Israel's victory in the Six-Day War in 1967 made it a major power in the Middle East. The Arab states were defeated and humiliated, and they realized that they could not defeat Israel on their own. The United States, which had already become a major superpower in the 1960s, began to support Israel more openly after the Six-Day War. The U.S. saw Israel as a valuable ally in the region, and it wanted to help Israel maintain its military superiority over the Arab states. The Saudi government, which was heavily dependent on the U.S. for oil exports, began to ignore the Palestinian issue in order to maintain good relations with the U.S. Egypt, which had been one of the most important Arab states that supported the Palestinians, signed a peace treaty with Israel in 1978 known as the Camp David Accords. Over time, more Israelis came to live in Palestine's West Bank and took over more of the land. This made the Palestinians upset, so they gathered and fought against the Israelis in a revolution called the First Intifada in 1987. During this time, groups like Hamas started to appear. According to the Oslo Accords, the West Bank would be divided into 3 regions. Region A would be fully controlled by Palestinians. Region B would be under joint control of Israelis and Palestinians, and Region C would be fully controlled by Israelis. This agreement gave the Israelis an advantage as they gained control of Palestinian land in the West Bank. At the same time, Palestinians got full control of certain land for themselves. This was a significant moment for Palestine because they now had their own land and were recognized as a separate new country, a major achievement. As time passed, a second intifada began in 2000 and lasted for almost 5 years. This conflict caused significant losses among the Israelis, Palestinian army, and civilians. The Gaza Strip came under complete control of Hamas during this time. This gives a brief overview of the ongoing conflict between Palestine and Israel. Even in 2021 and 2023, this war persists and is becoming more widespread. The question now is whether a solution can be found. The roots of this problem trace back to Britain, creating an issue during World War I, which was then left for the native people of the land to fight over. Finding a solution to this conflict is extremely complicated and personal. I would say highly improbable. Israeli settlements in the West Bank are sophisticated and advanced, while Palestinians live in small pockets. Israelis have acquired much land and have become a superior power with the goal of taking over the entire West Bank area. They invest heavily in the West Bank for this purpose. The Palestinians who lost their land to the Israelis can only hope that with time they might regain their land. Now, as we reflect on the complex situation between Palestine and Israel, we invite you, our viewers, to share your thoughts on what you believe should happen to bring about a resolution. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell to stay updated, share this video with others, and give it a thumbs up. Your support allows us to continue exploring and discussing critical issues. Thank you for being a part of this conversation.